I just had the opportunity to watch a legal seminar put on by Professor Alan Dershowitz. Now, Alan Dershowitz, as some of you who know who he is a professor emeritus of law. He's an attorney, and he's considered one of the most preeminent attorneys probably in the United States, and is highly valued for his opinion, what he thinks, and he's pretty well known and respected for his legal eagle principles. Now, I'm not necessarily a fan of Alan Dershowitz because during the O.J. trial back in 1994, he was on O.J.'s team. And obviously that didn't turn out the way that a lot of people had hoped or believed it would. But Alan Dershowitz was on his side, and I kind of had a bit of a chip on my shoulder involving that. But lately I've kind of figured out he knows the law and he understands the Constitution. But he was talking about a couple of things that you may be interested in from his perspective. One was the auto pen signing of documents by Joe Biden, and second was the pardoning of people. Well, here's what Alan Dershowitz said. He said, involving the signing, he said, if you go back in history, the auto pen, as we call it, back in the old days, it was actually invented by Benjamin Franklin. And back then it was called a polygraph. And what it was a pen that had wires attached to it, like 4 or 5, whatever, now it was wires. And like Thomas Jefferson would write something to someone, he would write and his hand would move, obviously, in his writing. Well, the wires were connected to other pins. And those pins would also move at the same time, and they would basically write his signature or whatever he was writing, copied it. That was a copy. And it was called back then a polygraph. Now, today we use those for legal things, for lie detectors we call them, but that's basically the interest or the starting of the auto pen. Now, here's what Alan Dershowitz says about Joe Biden signing those things. In the Constitution, it flat out says that involving a bill that comes to the president, the Constitution says he must sign the bill. He must, not a pen, not an artificial person, not an artificial item signing. He must sign the bill. Now, if it turns out, according to Alan Dershowitz, that these things that were signed were all signed by an auto pen or a polygraph, call it what you will, they are not, legitimate. And that could end up in a court of law and would be a very interesting legal proceeding based upon what the Constitution says. And he read the Constitution flat out and said he must sign. Not he must use a fancy pen or whatever to sign. No, he must sign. Now, regarding pardons, Alan Dershowitz says that under the rules of the Constitution, it says the president has the authority to pardon. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to have to sign something or have a signed pen. No, he has the authority. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Was Biden the one to grant the pardons to people, even though he has the authority, but was he the one who was granting the pardons? Since they were signed with an auto pen, you can argue, well, we don't know if he was there or not, or whether he knew what was going on. But the real problem is, for someone to fight that, he said that person would have to have standing. Now, that's going to be a tough one to do involving standing, because standing means someone would have to be affected by that particular ruling, that particular pardon, if you will. So who would have standing fighting off a pardon that was given to someone, a clemency? Who would have standing? That might be a rough one for the court to decide if someone has standing. Now, involving a law that's signed into law, that affects you and me and all those other kind of things, we would all then have standing. That would be easier to prove. But this is what's coming from Alan Dershowitz. And I watched his seminar, and now you know a little bit more than you knew before, something new to know about, and something that could result in some very interesting potential lawsuits that could be coming up down the road in the not-too-distant future. It might be something to watch, and I'm sure that Alan Dershowitz may be called in as an expert on this. Could be. Just wait and see what happens. It just might be interesting.